What's up guys, I'm BTC. Many players would agree there are some serious problems with the game, but rather than just going through a list of all the bad things, let's talk solutions and the start of a plan to save Overwatch. There is definitely no shortage of videos, forum posts, and more talking about all the things that are currently causing problems in Overwatch. And while it's true that some of this is just a bit of whining, there are also a lot of valid criticisms as well. The problem though is while there are plenty of complaints, there are very few, if any, proposed solutions. And if there is proposed solutions, it usually boils down to, well, Blizzard just needs to add role queue. And while that is something that could very well make an improvement to the game, it's no small task. Last time I checked, Jeff Kaplan doesn't have the Infinity Gauntlet, so he can't snap his fingers and just make it happen. There's supposed to be a dev update later this week, so maybe he will announce it, but I kinda doubt it, which means it's gonna take a while. Unfortunately, one of the issues with adding new stuff to the game is that anything they try to change takes away time and resources from those other larger projects like role queue. There's only so many developers and so many hours in the day, and while I do think larger solutions are required to fully address all the problems that the game has with the competitive ladder, throwers, smurfs, cheaters, and all the other issues, I do think that smaller solutions can be done right now that will at least help a little bit to alleviate the problem. Now, I do have some other really big solutions that I'm going to propose in future videos, but for this video, I want to talk more about those smaller things, because it is possible to add those smaller solutions now without having any significant delay on the bigger fixes like role queue. But these smaller solutions need to follow a very basic principle, which is minimum effort, maximum impact. Essentially, these need to be solutions that would require Blizzard to spend a few days or less in order to put them into the game. In fact, some of them that I'm about to suggest might take less than an hour to do. But let's be clear about something. These are not magical fixes. They're not going to resolve all the issues. The four things that I'm going to suggest are interim solutions that will have a beneficial impact on the competitive ladder and player experience in general, while taking only a minimal amount of developer time to add them. Once more, minimal effort, maximum impact. So let's go through the list. Number 1, allowing players to display role preferences. Role queue, if it gets added to the game, will be a major project that takes a very long time, but a role preference already has most of the functionality in the game. When Blizzard added the looking for group system, they made it so that players in your group can select what role they want to play, and then an icon displaying that is shown in the top right when you're on the main menu, and also on the info screen when you're in-game. In fact, players who aren't even in your group can see these icons. It's really good when you join a game and you see that some of the other players on your team are from the looking for group system, and that they have these icons showing you right away what role those players intend on playing. The problem is that in order for those icons to show up, the player needs to be using the looking for group system. So I'm sure some of you might have already guessed what my first suggestion is, and that's simply to allow players to pick a role preference that will be displayed for their team whenever they're in a competitive match. The player can change this whenever they want to. It doesn't force them to play any particular role. It's there to better help your team know which player prefers what role. Can this already be done through voice comms and text chat where players tell their team what role they want to play? Sure, of course it is. But let's be honest, not a lot of people do that. And there's also those players that don't even use voice chat and don't even respond to the text chat either. Additionally, there might be those players who reluctantly play a role they're not good at, but they never even say anything because they just don't want to cause any commotion among the team. Now, I'm not going to pretend that this system would take 5 minutes to add it, but it does seem like the vast majority of the requirements are already in the game thanks to the looking for group system. Blizzard just needs to find a way to allow players to activate it even when they're not in a looking for group. Number 2, let's improve communication, more specifically the voice chat. Communication in Overwatch is incredibly important, but unfortunately a lot of players choose not to use voice comms. Blizzard has tried to help this a little bit by adding that big button on the bottom right that players can just click on to join voice chat, but I think that even more can be done. Blizzard will never force players into voice chat, so my suggestion is instead to offer incentive. Give the players something extra if they're in the voice chat for the match. There are a couple of options that can be done. The first things that come to mind are going to be bonus experience or bonus competitive points to be used towards golden weapons. But the amount would need to be significant. You already get 150 experience for simply endorsing 3 people at the end of the match. So if Blizzard goes the experience route, it would probably have to be at least 500 to 1,000 bonus experience. If Blizzard wanted to go the competitive point route, then they could give, let's say, an extra 5 at the end of the match, regardless of whether you win or lose. This might also lessen the feeling of having to grind towards those gold weapons as well. Whether they use one of those options or possibly something else, the reward just needs to be significant enough to provide that incentive. You might be thinking, won't this kind of unofficially force players into using voice comms? But the answer is no, it definitely wouldn't, because players can still choose not to join voice comms if they don't want to, but they would be losing out on that incentive. So it's win-win all around, because not only do they get something for joining it, but the team also gets better by having more communication. But what about the people that cause problems in voice comms? And that's an easy one. You can mute, block, and report that player as necessary. There's no need for you to lose your bonus because someone else is being dumb. You don't have to leave chat. Just mute them, block them, report them, do whatever you need to. I think in order for this system to work though, the player would need to be in voice comms for at least 80 or 90% of the total match. You don't get to join it right at the end or just stay in for the first 10 seconds and then leave and still get the bonus. That's not gonna work. The point is for there to be more communication and a more cooperative team, so if you want the bonus, you gotta stay in chat for the whole duration. As for potential problems, is it possible that there's going to be a couple players that will turn their voice chat volume all the way down and join voice chat even though they can't hear it just to get the bonus? Sure, of course. But that's going to be a very, very small number of players, and on the whole, the benefit for the larger player base is going to greatly outweigh just a couple players who try to game the system like that. Number 3 addresses the ever-growing problem with Smurfs. This has become a serious issue for players in the lower brackets, particularly Gold and Platinum. In order to deal with the existing Smurf accounts, that's going to take a much bigger solution. There needs to be better identification and crackdown of that behavior, but for the purposes of this video, that falls outside of that minimal effort, maximum impact rule that I established earlier. So instead, let's talk about potential new Smurf accounts. The price for the PC version of the game is now much lower than it was in the previous years, making it easier for players to have multiple accounts. On console, it's even worse because Xbox and PlayStation players don't even need to buy another copy of the game. They can simply make a new account for their Smurf. So my solution is to raise the minimum required level for the competitive ladder. Again, this is not going to change any of the existing Smurf accounts, but it should be able to discourage new Smurf accounts. The problem then is how high can you make that requirement for the competitive ladder to discourage new Smurf accounts while at the same time not being overly frustrating to genuinely new players who want to play competitive. I think that number is somewhere between 40 and 50 levels. This I think would be fairly simple for Blizzard to do. I can't imagine it's as simple as changing the numbers in the code from 25 to 50, as there is certainly more to it than that, but I'm guessing that it's not all that difficult or time-consuming for this particular change. The fourth solution has to do with a more immediate response to throwers and toxic players, and that would be the avoid player function. I understand Blizzard is very concerned about long waits and queue times, so let me propose this. I imagine that Blizzard has a threshold that they feel is acceptable for waiting queue times. My guess is that the current queue times are quite a bit underneath that maximum threshold. My suggestion then is to increase the number of avoid player slots to 4, then give it 2 or 3 weeks and see how much of an impact that has on the queue times. If those numbers are still under the maximum threshold, then bump it up again to 5 avoid slots, repeat the process, and keep doing that again and again until the queue times get to the point where Blizzard no longer thinks it's acceptable, and then maybe roll it back 1 or 2. The truth is that even if most players see an extra 20 or 30-second increase in wait times, the players that are going to see the biggest increase are the throwers and the toxic players. Now, I'm not going to shed a tear if a thrower has to wait 15 minutes to find a match, but I would be very happy to not have them on my team when that match starts. So that's my list, and again, it's all about minimal effort, maximum impact. Are these changes going to completely fix the competitive ladder? No, of course not, but they would definitely improve it, and it wouldn't take all that long to implement these changes. And if we have to wait several months at a minimum for a role queue or some other major fix, then I honestly think that the developers should spend a couple days implementing small changes like the ones I mentioned, and that would go a very long way in making the competitive ladder a better experience while we wait for the role queue system and those other major changes to actually be implemented. Now, I'm sure that there are other things that could be added to this list that still follow the minimal effort, maximum impact rule. So if you guys have any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. And also, I would really appreciate it if you like and share this video, because all too often, all we hear about Overwatch in the competitive ladder is complaints and about how bad it is. So I think it would be a good change of pace if instead of sharing those complaints, we shared ways to improve the game that we all enjoy playing. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.